Gentrification is, while it is a loaded term and often, overused, rightfully so, because this is obviously a crisis that's sweeping the nation. It's not just your top tier urban cities, but also your second and third tier cities like Nashville's, like your Detroit's, that are also facing gentrification. But I realize, in putting it in a greater historical context, it's not gentrification, it's resegregation, right? It's looking at how cities are being resegregated. And we've seen this happen since, when I talked to you about Detroit, since sort of deindustrialization, since, sort of a post-World War II area where you have, communities, you have white flight, you have, racialized lending practices. In Sacramento, what happened is you had the entire West End where most of your Black, Japanese Americans settled. It was deemed blighted, right? You had a whole bunch of divestment that happened that provided a room for white folks and folks who had more money to be able to move out to the suburbs, which completely devastated the West End area. Media comes in, says it's blighted. They want to completely renew, do this sort of, urban renewal plan. We now have the Capitol Mall area, but there are thousands of families that get displaced in the process, right? So you have an entire community of Black folks, as well as other communities of color who are now displaced and get pushed to Oak Park, right? And that's what I find out. Oak Park originally was this white suburb. It actually was an amusement park. There was a amusement park there. There was a state fair that was there, baseball field, all this very rich history. And literally within maybe about 10 to 20 years of it becoming a more predominantly Black neighborhood, because this is where they're pushed to, all that evaporates. I was really interested in sort of my research questioning, or what I was interested in was better understanding the role of Black women artists within sort of combating gentrification, right? And so my work, it does that, right? So I look at several Black women artists, or they call themselves artivists, which is sort of a mix of artists and activists together, because they see their work as a form of activism, right? Whether it's murals, whether it's spoken word, whether it's Miss Barbara, who owns one of the only art galleries, Black art galleries in Sacramento, and uses it also as a community space for Black folks and other people of color to organize. Whether it's holding these community events, whether it's, you're a spoken word artist and you're calling out memories, of Uncle Jed's barbershop, of the beauty supply that used to be on the street. And you have folks in the audience that hear that, right? And they're able to remember it. And so they see themselves as artivists that are able to maintain those memories, maintain the space, and are really trying to push up against and resist some of the gentrification that's happening in Oak Park in particular. There's nothing like, having a 2-hour conversation with, an elder, or even a community member who might be younger, and just learning about the space and coloring it. I can sit in archives all day, but it's the narratives that bring it to life. I can look at survey data all day, but it's hearing those stories, it's being in people's homes and they're pulling out all this stuff, at the moment is like, how much shit do you have? But it colors it. It creates the vision for me to be able to understand what that space looked like and the importance of it and what it meant, and the socio-emotional impact that it had on that community. That's stuff that you can't measure. That's stuff that isn't always tangible. And it also helps build community, right? I think that's part of, what my role is. I'm not from Sacramento. I recognize that I'm a researcher, coming in. But I'm also committed to doing work within this community. I get seats at tables, right? And so what do you do when you have a seat at the table when other people don't? And so I need to know those narratives. I need to be able to understand those stories and help articulate that, to amplify those voices, right? So part of oral history for me is being able to amplify the voices, right? Because you need some amplification to counter, what the city is saying, what we need, and what developers are saying we need, right? If I had to boil it down to a single word, it would be equity, right? I think that is, what many of us, I think feminist researchers are striving for is equity, not equality, but equity. And obviously that looks different in different spaces. If I would add on to that, I mean, when I have space at the table, I always am thinking about those on the margins of the margins. And so feminist research at the end of the day should always center those narratives from the margins of the margins. And whenever you're problem solving or looking for solutions, I use my sort of feminist analysis, which is that, I operate, if I'm asked, what are students' experiences, on affordable housing, I'm thinking of a trans student parent who is low income. I'm thinking again, and that is what my feminist practice, analysis, my teachings have informed how I approach those problems, how I approach sitting at tables, how I approach my research, and whose voices I center.